骨柄の傷、鉄の錆、5年間の呪い、割りエレが書くコードを知り、何が真実かを知る。4つの異常な顔が乗り込み、目に火を灯した3万か。新しいチームリーダー、シスターの心、この果てない気境の空の下。ミッションはシンプルで他を毎週せよ、理由は問うない。サンダーの拳は思いが如く、文句の制度は決して崩れない。フェニックスが静かなガードをすり抜け、彼女がもがす一つ一つのリスク。しかし君の影は薄れ始める。愛のため、それとも小さなゲームのため、宣教師の祈り、シスターの笑顔、硬直したフレームを燃やす。ブレイクガス怖い、引き返せない点に到達。空虚が全てを飲み込んだ。星は消えた、チャートは燃え、エンジンが歌っていた歌は今も沈黙。気から信夜のスコと変えからキャットワンコモエメルバルは孤独にこのカオスのひび割れたたわし夜の強固に終わる。うんちゃれトリゾン、ここから我々の旅へ始まる。パラディンの誓いからババリアンの激飛ばり、こことまで二人を隔てていた線が曖昧になり始める。仮のトロフィーを見た、それがバリ技であったものに何をするのかを。あんたたちは闇に輪を巻き、死者を問い過ぎする。またないこの核がいる、このスパークがいる。さもないと恐ろしい運命に星は間違っている。クラッカースカイ、星は間違っている。我々が孤独に後悔する。我々が孤独に後悔する。
Starbreaker, The Stars That Went Wrong. Chapter 1. Welcome aboard the ASS Starbreaker. The graduation ceremony was a somber affair, held not in an academy hall, but in the polished, austere gantry of the Coalition's Deep Void staging area. Steve Prime, Mitsuri Prime, Xander Strongarm, and Felix Bonner stood rigidly at attention as the commendations were read. The act marked their final transition from highly specialized trainees into the elite, deployable operatives of the Planetary Retrieval Team. They were a diverse, formidable unit, disciplined, highly specialized in survival, extraction, and close-quarters conflict. As the final words were spoken, a shared sense of gravity settled over them. The relative safety of training was over, and they were officially instruments of Coalition policy, now awaiting their first independent deployment. Their first mission briefing followed immediately. They were led into a cold, brightly lit conference room where a holographic display of the ASTRA-9 sector spun lazily. The lights dimmed, and a clear, modulated voice, the voice of the station's controlling AI, filled the space, utterly devoid of human emphasis. Attention. Mission parameters have been diverted. You are assigned to accompany the heavy military frigate ASS Starbreaker on a high-priority deployment. Target designation: Recon Drone Stardust. Status: Silent. Location: Astra 9 Sector. Drone purpose was research, collecting materials from the planetary surface. Coalition database notes: the specific nature of the materials being gathered is currently unknown. The drone was transmitting data to an orbital satellite. That satellite was impacted by a meteor storm, resulting in catastrophic communication failure. Because the Stardust drone is no longer sending a signal, physical retrieval is mandated. Due to the proprietary nature of the drone's data encryption, intelligence cannot be extracted on site. The entire unit must be recovered and returned to Coalition jurisdiction. This mission requires planetary landing and extraction in a sector known for high geomagnetic interference and high operational risk. Operational roles for PRT deployment. Steve Prime. Assigned Team Lead. Command and Tactical Authority. Felix Bonner. Assigned Security and Reconnaissance Specialist. Oversight of Perimeter and Infiltration. Xander Strongarm. Assigned Technical and Extraction Specialist. Primary responsibility for mechanical stabilization and physical retrieval. Mitsuri Prime. Assigned Logistics and Life Support Specialist. Management of Resource Conservation and Extraction Assets. The objective is absolute retrieval. Familiarize yourselves with the ASS. Starbreaker's crew manifest and prepare for immediate boarding. The time window is now. The Stark, a motionless voice made the inherent dangers of the retrieval more potent than any shouted command could have. The mission was deceptively simple. They were now the only link between a crippled intelligence asset and the Coalition, with an impossibly difficult planet standing in the way. The ASS. Starbreaker, a heavy military frigate and a veteran of countless deep void patrols, was known throughout the Coalition fleet for two things: its reliability and its severity. A vessel of its vintage required meticulous, unrelenting discipline to survive the chaotic hazards of wildspace. On the Starbreaker, the chain of command was ironclad, a necessary doctrine where a single mistake could mean suffocating in the void. Orders emanating from the bridge were followed without question. The ship's senior staff was an exercise in balanced, martial capability, well documented in Coalition files. Captain Lyra Vancroft was a human paladin and the driving force of the ship's morale. She was a stoic, morally driven figure who carried the immense weight of her command. Commander Bazika was the gift fighter who served as the pragmatic, highly procedural first officer. Bazika's lawful neutral efficiency and focus on execution complemented Vancroft's zeal, ensuring that tactical intent was met with unwavering discipline. Lieutenant Fieler Moonglow was the astral elf wizard and the ship's primary navigational expert. Public records would note her academic background, masking the internal reality that she was terrified of navigational error. Every officer in the fleet knew the Starbreaker's engines were powerful but temperamental, making the relationship between the bridge and engineering a legendary source of tension. Lieutenant Grumnir Stonebeard was the dwarf artificer and was publicly known as short-tempered and fiercely protective of his engine. The standing rivalry, colloquially known throughout the fleet as engineering versus the bridge, was common knowledge. Grumnir was permanently upset at command for pushing the engine too hard and forcing maintenance under pressure. His crew was known to be fiercely loyal to him. Sergeant Boric Skullsplitter was the Minotaur Barbarian and the ship's internal enforcer. His personnel file noted his aggressive nature, and records of his security drills were part of the ship's operational history. While the new PRT members would pore over the official manifest, they would also need to internalize the operational consequences of this veteran crew. The ship's routine was legendary for its brutality. Damage control drills were mandatory and violent, run by specialists who could seal a breach in under 10 seconds. A new crew member would be expected to find these drills utterly terrifying. The lower ranks, the 0G Grunt, were known to share a deep, cynical bond forged by shared danger. The arrival of the highly specialized PRT, the New Blood, was guaranteed to be met with skepticism. They would be immediately viewed as soft and ignorant of the Starbreaker's unspoken rules, and would need to earn their place through rigorous, unforgiving testing. A crackle of adrenaline ran through the four specialists as they approached the boarding ramp of the shuttle assigned to take them to the Starbreaker. Their discipline held, but the excitement of deployment was unmistakable. Mitsuri Prime bumped shoulders playfully with Xander Strongarm as they stepped into the hull. "Can you believe it, Xander? Real deep void. And a full frigate crew to get to know," she said, her voice rich with anticipation. "I hear they have a Loxodon chaplain. I haven't tested my charisma against that species yet. Think I can get him to swap out the replicated ration packs for something actually edible." Xander, already checking the clearances and bracing points inside the shuttle, grinned, a flash of white against his dark face. "You worry about the food, Mitsuri. I'm focused on the 0G deadlift records I saw on the manifest. I need to know exactly how much mass Sergeant Boric actually moved. If that record's legit, I'm spending my downtime in the gym. This ship's going to need a new high score." Steve Prime was the last aboard, securing the main hatch before turning to face his team, the formal team leader persona firmly in place. "Focus, team. This isn't a cruise. We're integrating into a warship on a high-risk assignment. Any records Xander breaks, any friendships Mitsuri makes, they need to support the mission." Felix Vonner, who had been quietly securing her weapons locker, offered a final, sharp observation that cut through the light chatter. "They chose the Starbreaker for a reason. It's old, it's patched, and it's probably seen things we haven't read in simulations. We're the new, expensive parts they need to finish the job," she murmured, her silver eyes scanning the shuttle's vibrating hull. "But I still like the idea of new star charts." A quick, shared smile passed between the four, acknowledging the blend of danger and opportunity, before the deep, promising drone of the shuttle's engine vibrated to life beneath their boots. The deep drone of the shuttle's engine would be the last steady rhythm of their old lives. Four figures sat strapped into the acceleration couches, their personalized coalition uniforms a stark contrast to the utilitarian gray of the cabin. Steve Prime, the team's youngest lead, stared fixedly at the forward viewport, not with nervousness, but with the ruthless, detailed focus of a strategist mapping a combat zone. Next to him, his older sister, Mitsuri Prime, hummed a low, tuneless melody, her massive frame radiating an almost spiritual calm beneath the layers of combat gear. Her eyes held the glint of an adventurer, already anticipating the novel challenges and personalities that awaited her aboard the Starbreaker. They were gift, heavy, powerful, and utterly disciplined, but they carried the distinct, specialized expertise of the Coalition's most crucial teams. The atmosphere of the cabin was cut through by two distinct presences. Xander Strongarm, another gift team member and the technician, sat with the unnerving stillness of a statue, his hands resting on his knees. Every muscle in his body was a coil of monastic precision, his thoughts consumed by the upcoming mechanical challenges of a frigate rumored to be held together by rust and sheer force of will. Across from him, Felix Vonner offered no movement at all. Her silver eyes, enhanced by her astral heritage, absorbed the faint, cosmic radiation filtering through the hull, already mapping the silent, invisible threats of the void. She was the team's shadow in its eyes, and as the shuttle completed its magnetic coupling, the four knew the relative ease of the Academy was over, the void had begun to claim them. As the shuttle completed its final maneuver, the ASS Starbreaker loomed into the viewport, a colossal, daunting presence against the purple and pink nebulae of Wildspace. She was not a ship of pristine Coalition polish, but a brute forged in conflict, her massive oblong hull stretching like a heavily armored dirigible across the stars. This military frigate was scarred, the exterior plating near the docking bay darkened by the residue of plasma fire and patched with rough, functional welds that spoke to years of deep void travel. The ship's main, functional Spelljammer sails, rigid and dark, were furled close to the spine, giving the vessel a hunched, formidable silhouette. Below the hull, the structure betrayed its purpose. Weapon turrets were mounted low and heavy, while the docking bay, a reinforced maw, waited to receive them, a dark invitation into the belly of a true warship. The sight conveyed absolute commitment to duty and defense. The Starbreaker carried an antiquated but powerful dignity, her lines suggesting an older military design built to take and deal devastating punishment. The faint blue glow of a constantly struggling engine shimmered near the stern, a visible sign of the sheer effort required to push the massive bulk through the void. As the shuttle aligned, the sheer scale of the ship emphasized the isolation and the grave nature of their assignment. They were not boarding a pleasure craft, but a floating fortress that had seen too much and was ready for more. The shuttle's hydraulic clamps seized the docking ring of the ASS Starbreaker, the final coupling jolting the four specialists within. Steve Prime, the designated team lead, checked the seals on his team's gear. Mitsuri Prime, her eyes glinting with amusement, smoothed the front of her uniform. They were the Coalition's finest, yet their introduction to the veteran crew was cold. The inner hatch hissed open, revealing Commander Bazooka, a massive gif whose face held the perpetual disappointment of a soldier who had seen too much. "You are late," Bazooka stated, his voice a gravelly monotone. "Your performance here is not a luxury, it is an imperative. Find your berths. You will report to the mess hall at 0400 for chow." The first night was an exercise in infiltration. Steve Prime immersed himself in the tactical matrix, memorizing crew protocols. Xander Strongarm found the gym, immediately bonding with a veteran GIF security guard over their mutual reverence for powerlifting form, silently challenging the fitness records board with every set. Felix Bonner slipped into the engineering decks, befriending a nervous kobold engineer, gaining access to the low-level chatter and schematics of the ship. Meanwhile, Mitsuri Prime sought out Acolyte Boomy, the ship's chaplain. She pinned him in the med bay, engaging him in a persistent, charismatic flirtation that left the Loxodon visibly flustered, struggling to recall his prayers. She retires for the night, satisfied by another loop of prayer beads that she adds with all the others. The calm shattered on their first morning. The ship's klaxons wailed, not an exercise tone, but a harsh, immediate siren. "All hands! All hands!" Commander Bazooka's voice erupted over the comms, iron in his tone. "PRT. Hull breach, Deck 3, forward engineering. This is your qualification. Move, move." They moved as one, sealing the breach flawlessly and in near record time, under the careful watch of Commander Bazooka and the ship's chief engineer. Earning respect and their place to stand on the deck of the Starbreaker. They learned the following evening, as the ship's alarms rang out and another team was called to seal a breach on Deck 3, forward engineering, that this was the staging ground for the ship's routine emergency breach drill procedure. A grueling practice that Bazooka strictly enforced, a procedure that has saved the vessel and given the Starbreaker its distinct profile. The routine of the ASS. Starbreaker, the endless low thrum of the engine, the cycling of air, the distant echo of drill simulations, was violently interrupted. The ship's internal communications system crackled to life with immediate, undeniable urgency. "PRT personnel. All members report to the bridge, immediately." Code red. Commander Bazooka's voice, usually cold and modulated, held a barely contained edge of urgency. The four specialists converged on the command deck. Captain Lyra Vancroft stood before the main viewport. "We have diverted," Vancroft announced, her voice firm. "Received a distress signal from a Coalition-flagged vessel. It appears to be a civilian craft. We are obligated to assist." Commander Bazooka stepped forward, his massive form filling a section of the tactical display. "This is no simple recovery. The target is crippled. PRT, your objective is twofold." He pointed a thick finger at the salvage priorities flickering on a secondary screen. "First, board the derelict and retrieve the survivors, regardless of their condition. Second, secure any strategic assets. Captain's orders are to prioritize Spelljammer helm fuel and any usable supplies. Retrieve and return." Steve Prime gave a sharp salute. "Understood, Commander. Survivors, fuel, and supplies. What is the time window?" "The time window is now," Bazooka growled. "Prepare the jump module. Move." The PRT deployed quickly, the jump module launching into the volatile currents of willed space. They found the crippled vessel listing silently, its sleek, yacht-like hull contrasting sharply with the scarred, utilitarian bulk of the Starbreaker. It was an ostentatious ship, a rich traveler's vessel, now rendered inert and dark. The boarding was tense. Steve Prime led the entry team through the derelict's ruptured airlock. Inside, the zero-gravity environment suggested luxury rather than combat. The search was systematic. They located the first compartment, a secure hold that, despite the yacht's expensive fittings, surprisingly contained military supplies. Mitsuri, directing the retrieval efforts, oversaw the dangerous extraction. They secured an emergency life support system, and in a heavily locked compartment not typically found on pleasure craft, they discovered 50 kilograms of munitions, a surprising find given the ship's civilian appearance. They quickly hauled these assets back toward the airlock. Felix, navigating a maze of collapsed corridors, found a secondary, pressurized compartment. She reported the find to Steve, who brought Xander to the location. Inside the hold, they found a critical piece of technology, a surprisingly intact, secondary jump module power source, an engine capable of powering a larger emergency vessel. Mitsuri immediately stabilized the sensitive equipment. Nearby, they located the ultimate prize, a sealed container marked with Coalition priority codes. Xander used a plasma cutter and a precisely controlled monk's strength to crack it open, revealing 60 kilograms of Spelljammer helm fuel, a massive, invaluable find. Finally, they located the survivors. Out of 6 crew members, 2 figures miraculously showed signs of life, barely alive, bodies scattered across the ship's egresses. They were inert, unconscious, and critically injured. Mitsuri, the cleric, focused her logistics training, quickly applying stabilizing patches and life support. They were bundled carefully onto stretchers, their identities and loyalties completely unknown. The mission accomplished, the PRT hauled their 2 unknown passengers and their invaluable cargo, including the salvaged jump module power source, back to the ASS Starbreaker. They returned not just with lives saved, but with a hull that included high-value fuel and unexpected military assets, solidifying their competence in the eyes of the entire veteran crew. Chapter 2. A Leaf on the Wind. The days aboard the Starbreaker had settled into a strained routine following the derelict rescue, with the ship speeding toward Astra 9. The PRT, having proved their competence, used the limited downtime to further integrate and challenge themselves. Xander Strongarm spent hours in the ship's cramped gym, testing his focused strength against the fitness records board. He was working specifically on the 0G deadlift simulator, determined to challenge Sergeant Borik's staggering heavy lifting scores and cement his place as a primary physical contender. Meanwhile, the mess hall remained the primary social arena. Mitsuri Prime continued her intricate, public game with Chaplain Boomy, seeking him out for long conversations over replicated chow, her relentless, charismatic attention keeping the Loxodon in a state of flustered distraction. Felix and Steve, outside of assisting with maintenance, often reviewed data or quietly observed the rest of the crew, keeping a watchful eye on the growing dynamics between the PRT and the veteran personnel before the critical mission ahead. The call came as Steve Prime was in the mid-deck corridor, observing Xander's progress in the gym. The encrypted chime sounded on his wrist comms, and the voice of Bazooka, sharp and non-negotiable, cut through the ambient sound. Prime, the tiefling survivor is conscious. She has not been interrogated yet. You are ordered to assemble the Planetary Retrieval Team immediately and lead the investigation. We need to know who she is, where she came from, and why her vessel was carrying Coalition ordnance. This cannot wait. The order was massive, placing the weight of validating a potential asset, or threat, squarely on the young Gift's shoulders. The responsibility for the interrogation, however, was immediately delegated. Knowing the task required precision, not blunt force, Steve sought out his most subtle specialist. He found Felix and immediately tasked her with the lead role. Felix, Steve ordered, his voice low. You will conduct the interrogation. Find the secrets she's hiding, test her competence, and determine her loyalty. We won't put our lives in her hands until we have your full report. The entire team backs you up, but the questions, and the answers, are yours. Felix gave a sharp nod, accepting the crucial assignment as she headed toward the medbay, ready to use her rogue skills to unlock the secrets of their new task. The sterile environment of the interrogation room, cold and minimal beneath the glare of the Coalition standard lights, did nothing to faze Felix Vonner. The astral elf leaned forward, her elbows resting on the polished metal table, her gaze steady and utterly penetrating. She was a security specialist, and her purpose was to peel back the layers of deception. "Let's be direct, Journey," Felix began, her voice low and even, devoid of accusation, yet heavy with command. "We found heavy munitions on that derelict, a civilian yacht. We need to know who you really are, and why you were guarding a military cache. Your life depends on the truth." Journey met the gaze unflinchingly, a slow, practiced calm washing over her features, making her seem weary rather than guilty. "I understand the optics, specialist. The truth is simple. I was a passenger, contracted for long-range jump stabilization. I was only aboard for a couple of weeks, replacing a previous sensor tech who took ill at a supply station. I was strictly there to read sensors and nothing else," she continued, spinning the lie seamlessly. "My former associates suspected the route was dangerous and purchased the munitions after I joined. They planned to sell them, yes, but I had no operational knowledge, only my sorcerer skills, which were necessary to keep that rickety ship flying. My hands were on the charts, not the cargo." A flicker of professional doubt crossed Felix's sharp eyes. The lie was plausible, covering the munitions while framing Journey as a mere employee. But the skill issue remained paramount. "The captain needs an arcane specialist now. Your skills are real, I verified that. But if you failed to sense or avert your own ship's destruction, how can we trust you with the Starbreaker's fate?" Journey delivered the final, calculated blow. She averted her gaze momentarily, a pause of manufactured shame. "My captain was drunk on greed. My warnings about the gravitational shear were ignored. I was just a temporary sensor replacement, and they dismissed me. I learned my lesson. I will not be ignored here. I was a passenger then, I am a dedicated crew member now. Test my sensors. You will find that my loyalty is the only thing stronger than this ship's gravity." Felix analyzed the performance, the subtle tremor in the voice, the feigned resignation. The story was watertight, the skills verifiable, and the promise of future dedication was exactly what the crippled Starbreaker needed. The rogue had found nothing substantial to contradict the tiefling's tale. The deception was complete. Following Felix's detailed report, which, unbeknownst to the command staff, was based on Journey's masterful deception, the final decision was immediate and absolute. Commander Bazooka, his face betraying nothing, looked across the tactical bridge at Steve Prime. "Prime," he stated, his voice a low, heavy declaration. "The sorcerer is verified. Her skills are necessary, and her loyalty report is acceptable. Effective immediately, the survivor-designated Journey is reassigned. She is the Planetary Retrieval Team's new arcane sensor specialist. Integrate her now. The window for the mission has closed to 0600. Move." The order was final, cementing Journey's place as the critical fifth component of the team, the final piece of the machine now ready to be deployed. Her welcome to the team was dramatic. Xander Strongarm, overcome with the gift's powerful, straightforward enthusiasm for the fully assembled team, tore off his tunic and rushed at her. Journey, startled, attempted a sorcerer's evasion, but she was captured near instantly in a massive, crushing hug, a bizarre, forceful introduction to her new crew. The final 24 hours before the launch of the planetary drone retrieval mission were marked by intense, non-strenuous focus. All personal activities, the heavy lifting contests and the mess hall flirtations, were shelved. The team's full attention was dedicated to technical and tactical readiness. Xander Strongarm and Steve Prime spent hours inside the jump module, running diagnostics, checking the thruster assemblies, and meticulously confirming the integrity of the winch system. Every cable and sensor array was doubled and triple-checked, ensuring the craft was in peak condition for the volatile atmosphere. Simultaneously, the team fully integrated Journey into the mission parameters. Steve and Felix walked her through the drone's likely location, the known geomagnetic interference, and the tight time constraints. They pored over schematics, ensuring the sorcerer understood the precise timing of the atmospheric jump and the critical sensor readings she would need to interpret. The entire team functioned as a single, quiet machine, preparing their gear and their minds for the tight 90-minute window that awaited them, dedicating every final hour to technical mastery and unified command. The period of intense preparation concluded with the final mission brief. Steve Prime was summoned to the bridge alongside his fully integrated team. The tension in the room reflected the tight margins of the upcoming retrieval. Commander Bazooka stood before the main tactical screen, his face granite hard. "PRT, listen up." His voice cracked, sharp and uncompromising. "The Coalition recon drone, Stardust, is down there on ASTRA-9. We have established a retrieval window of 90 minutes. That is your absolute limit. Go over, and we don't risk the frigate for a rescue." "Understood." Steve's acknowledgement was sharp. Lieutenant Fieler warned them of the intense geomagnetic and arcane interference that would blind their suit sensors, confirming the reliance on Journey's skill. The final minutes before launching the jump module were a hive of controlled, focused activity. Xander Strongarm verified the primary thruster coils, his massive hands moving with surprising precision as he confirmed the stabilization gyros were cycling correctly for the volatile atmosphere. Mitsuri Prime sealed the mission supply packs, triple-checking the integrity of the extraction winch and organizing the emergency medical patches. Felix Vonner worked with Journey, calibrating the arcane sensors and comms systems against the known geomagnetic interference levels, testing the limits of their external data link one last time. Finally, Steve Prime ran through the 90-minute timeline and insertion parameters with the crew, his eyes locking with each specialist, securing their final, unwavering commitment before giving the silent nod to the Starbreaker command deck for launch clearance. The jump module violently decoupled from the Starbreaker, its thrusters screaming as it plunged into the atmosphere of Astra 9. The initial 30 minutes of transit were a brutal contest against the volatile environment. True to Lieutenant Fieler's warning, the air was thick with geomagnetic and arcane interference. Conventional radar was useless, filling the cockpit with blinding static. Journey earned her place immediately, her internal focus absolute as she interpreted the chaotic sensor readings, translating the raw energy signatures into usable navigation data that Felix Vonner leveraged to keep the small craft on its demanding trajectory. The module shuddered constantly, fighting the unseen magnetic drag that tried to slow their progress and pulled them off course, turning the journey into a tense, agonizing crawl through atmospheric soup. The clock was the true enemy, its insistent digital count displayed starkly against the tactical feed. Every minute spent fighting the turbulence was a minute stolen from the critical retrieval window. Steve Prime maintained a disciplined silence, his eyes fixed on the timer, ignoring the punishing vibration of the hull. Finally, the terrain below resolved into jagged, unforgiving rock formations, the mouth of the canyon where the drone lay inert. As the jump module fought one last, violent updraft and managed to stabilize, the digital timer confirmed the grim arithmetic of their journey. 60 minutes remaining, Steve Prime confirmed over the comms, the sound clipped and final as the module reached the drone's location. The terrain below was a labyrinth of shadows and treacherous, jagged crystalline structures that glowed faintly with residual atmospheric charge. It was an environment designed to shred the jump module. Felix Vonner took the controls, her entire concentration locked onto the minimal feedback provided by the archaic maneuvering jets. She had to hold the module in a trembling, agonizingly precise hover, fighting the relentless, unseen forces of the magnetic interference that tried to yank the craft sideways or drive it into the canyon floor. The sound of the wind shearing past the hull was a high-pitched scream, a constant reminder that one wrong micron of thrust could send them tumbling. Finally, the hover was locked. A heavy, reinforced tow cable, vibrating with the strain, deployed from the module's belly and dropped the 50 feet to the unstable ground below. Xander Strongarm, his massive form clad in the reinforced suit, descended first, anchoring himself on the precarious edge of a rock shelf, securing the line. Mitsuri Prime followed, landing with surprising grace despite her bulk. The drone was visible, a small, dark form lying just beyond a network of cracks. Pressed ruthlessly by the ticking clock, which dominated all tactical thinking, the specialist broke away from Xander's secured position and rushed toward the drone, prioritizing speed over caution. She was within striking distance when the quiet ground betrayed them. The earth didn't just crack, it exploded outward in a torrent of fine, acidic dust and living organisms. A dense, furious crawling insect swarm, a sickening, black carpet of chitin and mandibles, boiled from the fissure, surging across the ground straight for Mitsuri. The threat was immense, but the team's response was immediate and absolute. Before the swarm could reach Mitsuri, the entire team opened fire with their focused pistols. The energy blasts ripped through the mass of insects, the concentrated volume of fire turning the ground into a superheated zone. The swarm was neutralized instantly, decimated by the coordinated attack, leaving a clear path. Xander moved quickly, secured the drone, and attached the hoist line. The mission was successful, completed without incident or injury. The jump module, its thrusters firing hard, hauled the PRT and the drone out of the planet's volatile gravity well. They were minutes from the ASS Starbreaker, the protocol to rendezvous already underway. It happened without warning. An impossible rift appeared in the seamless blackness of space, a colossal wound of swirling, corrupted light that screamed soundlessly at the fabric of reality. The light was not mere energy, it was a terrifying palette of violet, diseased greens, and impossible blues. Evasive maneuvers. All Han. Captain Bancroft's frantic communication was cut short. The ASS Starbreaker, massive and defiant, was positioned directly in the anomaly's path. The frigate didn't fight, it simply vanished. One moment, the ship was a scarred fortress of steel. The next, it was seized by the swirling vortex, pulled violently, completely consumed, and gone. A stunned silence gripped the jump module's cabin, broken only by the whine of protesting machinery. The team's comms exploded with static. What was that? What was that thing? Xander Strongarm yelled, his voice tight with pure, unadulterated shock. Steve Prime, the team lead, stared fixedly at the point where his flagship had just ceased to exist. Felix Bonner, the astral elf, scanned the tactical readouts, her dark vision useless against the sheer corruption of the light. She found no data, only a zero-point energy spike that threatened to fry their own systems. It was then, in that moment of collective terror, that Journey, the tiefling sorcerer, reacted. She didn't scream or panic. A faint, almost serene smile touched her lips, a chilling expression of complicity and acceptance that Steve Prime caught in his peripheral vision. As the catastrophic gravitational pull of the anomaly began to seize the jump module, she spoke, her voice calm against the rising metallic shriek of the hull stresses. "We're going for a ride, guys." The phrase was swallowed by the escalating noise. The jump module was violently slammed sideways, its internal stabilizers fighting a losing battle. The G-forces crushed the team into their seats, the world dissolving into flashes of sick light and blinding speed. "It's best not to fight it," shouted Journey to Felix, desperate to regain control of the jump module. They were no longer piloting, they were simply victims. The chaos of the rift, the pure, raw violence of non-space, consumed them completely, tearing them away from the Coalition sector, hurtling them into a dark, unknown destiny. Chapter 3. The Sacrifice of Survival. The violence that had consumed the jump module ended, not with a stop, but with a terrifying stillness. One moment, the cabin was a screaming torture chamber of light and pressure. The next, it was spitting out into a black, vast silence. The impact of the emergence was bone-jarring. Alarms shrieked from the failing consoles, but the greatest relief was visual. Felix Bonner and Journey, whose dark vision cut through the gloom, Felix reported, "Contact, visual. The Starbreaker is here. Range approximately 500 to 600 meters. No external power. She's inert." Journey, her arcane senses vibrating from the sheer corruption of the jump, immediately partnered with the pilot. She provided the crucial navigational stabilization, interpreting the geomagnetic chaos that rendered conventional sensors useless. Working in concert, the sorcerer and the rogue used the module's remaining maneuvering thrusters to bridge the terrifying gap. Within 30 minutes of emerging into the void, the jump module shuddered into the Starbreaker's emergency docking ring. The PRT scrambled aboard, finding their flagship in a state of absolute, crippled despair. The veterans were pale, exhausted, and barely functioning. There was no time for debriefing or rest. The ship was hemorrhaging power and integrity. The next 48 hours were a gauntlet of non-stop, desperate labor. The entire PRT was thrown into the massive effort to keep the frigate viable. Steve Prime commanded the repair rotation, while Mitsuri Prime managed the failing life support and power distribution, rationing every surge of energy. Felix and Steve strapped into external harnesses, working alongside terrified veteran crewmen to seal exterior hull breaches, welding and patching the wounds left by the dimensional trauma. Inside, the core of the effort centered on the engine room. Xander Strongarm and Journey worked side by side with a hyper-stressed Lieutenant Grumnir. Xander wrestled with cold, fractured components, using his monk's focused strength and technician skills, while Journey used her arcane knowledge to read the impossible energy flows. Their goal was singular: to stabilize the main propulsion system enough to operate for a controlled 12 hours a day, the limit of power conservation until the Spelljammer helm could be made fully functional. The exhaustion was absolute. Every muscle ached, every breath felt earned, yet the PRT drove forward. They were the fresh blood, the specialists who understood that the immediate crisis was mechanical, not psychological. By the end of the second day, the engine was stabilized, the hull was sealed, and the Starbreaker was limping forward into a phase of controlled, rationed survival. The atmosphere inside the ASS Starbreaker was one of profound, cold exhaustion. The catastrophic displacement had crippled the engine. For 8 days, the massive frigate drifted, propelled only by a sputtering fraction of its true power. To conserve the dwindling fuel, the ship moved at half speed, surviving on a strict ration of 12 hours of energy consumption per day. The decks were frigid, lights were low, and the air was thick with recycled fear. For Captain Lyra Vancroft, the bridge had become a prison of absolute uncertainty. She would stand before the main viewport for hours, hands clasped behind her back, her uniform slowly growing rumpled and stained. Her crisis was silent, born from the realization that her experience and all her coalition training were useless in the face of the impossible, chaotic stars that filled the void. She began to talk to herself in low, strained murmurs, not about command, but about non-existent equations, attempting to impose forgotten laws on a universe that had fractured. The officers avoided engaging her, recognizing that the captain was adrift in a deeper, more profound void than the Starbreaker. They managed the ship by consensus and habit, silently acknowledging that their highest authority had succumbed to the existential dread of their impossible location. In the cramped astrogation lab, Lieutenant Fieler was visibly fracturing under the twin pressures of impossible data and the presence of the new specialist. She would spend her watch cycling through every salvaged chart and every known navigational algorithm, only to slam her fist down, yelling, "It's not Euclidean." The jump changed the rules. Her console was littered with discarded printouts, proof of the chaos. The ultimate friction, however, lay with the arcane specialist, Journey. Fieler knew Journey was accurately interpreting the shifting cosmic background radiation, the proof that they were being carried by unknown currents. Yet, Fieler's professional resentment simmered, fueled by the fact that this untrusted, casually deceptive survivor was succeeding where decades of coalition training had failed. This hostile, unspoken dynamic between the established astrogator and the invaluable new specialist provided a continuous, silent hum of tension in the command decks. The crippled state of the Starbreaker intensified the need for absolute security over the most valuable assets salvaged during the first rescue. Throughout the 8 days of cold drift, every piece of high-value technology and every questionable passenger was subject to continuous, frigid surveillance. Sergeant Boric, the scowling Minotaur security chief whose bulk vibrated with the raw tension gripping the ship, was the driving force behind this vigilance. The surviving civilian, Journey, now the arcane specialist, remained under the close, suspicious watch of security personnel, particularly during the dangerous 12-hour periods of engine silence. Furthermore, the second, still unidentified survivor, who remained inert and unconscious in the med bay, was kept under constant high-security watch, treated not as a patient, but as an unpredictable, high-risk liability. Boric extended this scrutiny to the existing crew, ensuring those accused of petty theft were constantly monitored, confirming his grim conviction that threats could emerge from any quarter. He personally oversaw the security details for these individuals, as well as the high-value assets salvaged from the civilian craft, the Spelljammer helm fuel and the jump module power source. The mess hall remained the most surreal location aboard the Starbreaker, dominated by the bizarre courtship between Mitsuri Prime and Chaplain Bumi. The crisis seemed only to intensify Mitsuri's pursuit. She sought the Loxodon Chaplain out for every meal, engaging him in long, rambling conversations over tasteless replicated chow. Her unrelenting, charismatic attention, a star-crossed lover's dynamic in the making, kept the chaplain in a state of perpetually flustered distraction. The crew observed this spectacle with a strange mixture of annoyance and gratitude. The intense, public flirting was the only genuinely human drama left on the ship, a stubborn, beautiful sign that not all desires had been reduced to fear and survival. Bumi, despite his escalating exhaustion and the clear need to focus on crew morale, found himself incapable of completely escaping the cleric's gravitational pull. Down in the engineering decks and the bunks, the 12-hour dread became the primary antagonist. Every crew member, including Xander Strongarm, knew that when the countdown timer reached 0 and the power was manually pulled to conserve the unstable fuel, the entire ship would fall silent. This period of dead drift created a profound psychological vulnerability. They were forced to lie awake, listening to the void outside the hull, imagining the threats of the void that might detect the vast, cold metal hulk drifting past. The communal fear was absolute, forcing the crew to rely on each other in the darkness, forging desperate, fragile super-friend alliances based on shared terror and the simple need for a warm presence in the cold, silent hours. The veteran crew had broken. They moved like ghosts, their faces hollowed out by 8 days of silent, desperate maintenance. The PRT worked alongside them, Xander and Steve wrestling with cold, buckled bulkheads, Mitsuri rationing supplies, and Journey, the knowing deceiver, assisting Lieutenant Fieler in the dim, powerless sensor bay, weaving a complex web of lies with every useful piece of arcane data she provided. On the final morning of the endless drift, an order cut through the gloom. Prime. Team lead Steve Prime report to the bridge immediately. Code red briefing. Steve ascended through the cold decks to the command center. The bridge, once a hub of light and action, was a cave of dim, red emergency lighting. Commander Bazooka stood rigid beside the main tactical console, while Captain Bancroft stared out at the dizzying chaos of the unknown void. Report, Prime, Bazooka snapped, his voice barely above a whisper. Bancroft turned, her face a mask of strained command. Our sensors have picked up contact. We have an engagement. 2 ships. 1 coalition, 1 hostile. The hostile is exponentially superior. Bazooka leaned in, his voice dropping to a harsh rumble. This is the order, Prime. We are going completely silent. No emitters, no weapons cycling, no power fluctuation. We do not engage. Our priority is survival. We observe, and we wait for opportunity. Is that understood? Understood, Commander, Steve confirmed, his jaw tight. The next hour was spent in suffocating silence. The entire bridge crew watched a single, terrifying spectacle play out on the main viewport, now functioning only as a glorified, enormous window. The hostile ship, sleek, fast, and radiating sheer technological dominance, moved around the crippled coalition vessel with the cold precision of a scientist dissecting prey. The aggressors fired. Not in salvos, but with focused, devastating beams of energy that tore the coalition ship apart piece by piece. There were no return volleys, no pleas for aid on the comms, only the silent, brutal destruction witnessed in agonizing detail by the Starbreaker crew. Every crewman understood the truth. They were watching their own potential fate. Finally, the carnage ended. The ship, seemingly satisfied, turned its bow and vanished into the darkness as quickly as it had arrived. Captain Bancroft spoke first, her voice strained but regaining its martial edge. The threat is clear. We owe the Coalition one final duty. Commander, deploy the PRT. Objective is immediate boarding and salvage. Follow all Coalition protocols. Prioritize that helm. We need that engine to live. Bazakaw's command was quick and direct. PRT, you have your orders. Move. This is a smash and grab. The minute you have secured the helm, you return. We are not staying in this sector a second longer than we have to. The long, agonizing drift was over. Steve Prime returned to his team, the silence of the massacre still echoing in his mind, and delivered the orders that would lead them directly into the dark embrace of the derelict Coalition vessel. The heavy fire door to the shuttle bay hissed open, revealing the armored form of Sergeant Boric, the immense, scowling Minotaur security chief. He moved to intercept Steve Prime, blocking the team lead's path toward the jump module. Boric's voice was a low growl, vibrating with the raw tension that had gripped the ship since the wormhole jump. "Hold, Prime," Boric commanded, his massive bulk ensuring immediate compliance. A necessary addendum to Bazakaw's orders. This is a salvage and intelligence run only. Steve met the sergeant's glare. "If we find survivors." Boric cut him off, his voice dropping to a harsh, final rasp. "There are no survivors. Not from that ship. Not from the creatures who did that work." He gestured vaguely toward the viewing port, where the image of the ruined Coalition vessel hung. "Those things do not leave witnesses. If you find anyone, they are either part of the trap, infected, or simply too broken to live. They are liabilities we cannot afford to feed, heal, or contain on a crippled ship. Do not bring back life. Bring back the data and the helm. That is your sole mission." The order was harsh, contradicting the initial mission brief during the first rescue, and it settled heavily between them, a cold promise of difficult choices in the void. This new order was not sitting well with Xander, who was visibly taken back at the sudden breach in Coalition protocols and disregard for what appears to be distressed allies. Xander makes a desperate silence promise: survivors must be shown to any available escape pods. The orders echoed in his mind as the shuttle door clamped shut and the jump module began decoupling from her mother ship. The jump module, guided by the cold calculation of Steve Prime and the silent expertise of Felix and Journey, maneuvered through the cosmic debris field and secured itself to the derelict's emergency airlock. The damage was devastatingly clear. Massive, clean gaseous smoke of focused energy fire, and sections of the hull were peeled back like tin. Inside the cramped cabin, the tension was a physical pressure. Steve Prime reiterated the command: "No lamps. Felix, Journey, you're the eyes. Security detail stays tight. We move fast. No engagement, no rescue." As the inner hatch hissed open, revealing a void that swallowed light, Felix Bonner immediately deployed her scouting drones. The tiny, near-invisible devices slipped into the darkness of the loading dock, sending back infrared and structural data. The first report was chillingly simple: blood on the floor. The discovery confirmed this was more than wreckage, it was a crime scene. The team exited the module with extreme caution. The absolute darkness was broken only by the silver glow of Felix's eyes and the subtle data overlays in their helmets. And then, the true horror materialized in the doorway of the loading dock. A fully skinned GIF, a veteran crewman of the derelict, hung suspended in the entry frame, meticulously strung up by hooks. The body was a ghastly, brutal display, stripped of skin and identity, a terrifying warning mounted in their path. The sight confirmed the Predator's presence and its lethal, trophy-taking methods. As Xander moved past the macabre spectacle, his personal promise to find survivors felt like a painful, impossible joke. This was not a rescue site, it was a silent, sprawling chamber of execution, and the PRT had just entered the killer's trophy room. Moving beyond the horrific tableau in the loading dock, Steve Prime gave the order to proceed, his voice a low hiss in the comms. They moved with strained caution, Felix and Journey sweeping the corridor ahead with their dark vision. The cold, damaged main hull opened before them, a labyrinth of buckled bulkheads and floating debris. It was here, floating silently near a ruptured service conduit, that they found the second trophy. Not a body, but a skin, a vast, tan hide of a large, elephantine creature, meticulously peeled and distended. It was the complete skin of a loxodon, utterly empty, hanging loosely in the zero gravity like a grotesque, oversized banner. There were no bones, no internal organs, just the casing, confirming the predator was not only a killer but a surgical, meticulous collector of remains. The sheer, chilling violation of the site, the systematic removal of everything but the exterior, sent a fresh wave of visceral disgust through the tight-knit team, deepening the terrifying realization of the enemy they faced. Steve Prime, voice tight with visceral disgust, relays the information to Ensign Coco. Command, this is Prime. We have confirmed multiple fatalities. Non-standard. We are seeing surgical removal of the epidermis. Bodies skinned, stripped, arranged. This is an execution chamber, not a wreck. Commander Bazakov's voice cut the open white noise of the team's communication systems, usually cold, came back low and strained. Prime, maintain silence. Do not speculate. Stick to salvage. We know the aggressors are exponentially superior. Their methods are known to command. Assume they are still in the sector. You focus on the helm. Understood, Commander. But what, exactly, are we dealing with? Prime's desperate tone clear even through the static of uncalibrated comm lines. Is there a known protocol for this level of systematic mutilation? A long, static-laced pause, heavy with unshared dread. Commander Bazika responded, the hostile ship is a hunter, Prime. That is all you need to know. It takes trophies. Secure the perimeter and prioritize the helm. Do not bring back life. Move. The warning was sparse, brutal, and more terrifying than a detailed file. It confirmed that command recognized the signature of the killer, but had no effective countermeasure, leaving the PRT alone with the hunter's horrific trophies. As Xander and the team moved through the absolute darkness of the derelict, his massive form silent in the zero-gravity environment, his disciplined mind remained wholly focused on the salvage objectives. He fully engaged in the systematic search for valuable cargo, his attention fixed on identifying the critical assets necessary for the Starbreaker's survival. Yet, beneath the layers of mission focus, an unspoken promise resonated: there must be someone. He maintained a persistent, private vigilance, his senses straining for any faint sign of life, any whisper of a surviving soul hidden in the wreckage. Even though his hands were committed to securing the helm fuel and the munitions, his heart listened for the impossible chance to guide a survivor to an escape pod, fulfilling his vow even if he couldn't violate the order to return them to the ship. Following the gruesome discoveries of the skinned crewmen, the PRT forced their professional discipline to the foreground. They moved methodically, guided by the cold efficiency of the mission clock and the combined dark vision of Felix and Journey. The primary objective remained: acquire necessary assets. The team bypassed shattered cabins, their hands moving over cold metal and debris, the unspoken fear of the Predator's return an icy presence in the gloom. Felix guided Xander through the maintenance decks, the technician's powerful build and skills turning the chaos into critical salvage. They quickly located a primary service locker, finding 10 hull-grade metal sheets and 15 feet of round tube, necessary for structural repairs back on the Starbreaker. All the while, Xander's hands were methodical on the cold metal, but his mind strained for any sign of life, his vow to find survivors a sharp, agonizing counterpoint to the silence. The search yielded further riches. Mitsuri located a crucial storage unit and, working with surprising finesse, carefully extracted 300 feet of high-tension cable, neatly coiled and untouched by the environmental damage. This haul of material was already invaluable, ensuring the engineers could repair major external structures once they returned. In the central cabins, Mitsuri and Journey focused on intelligence and arms. Journey's arcane readings flagged a secure locker, yielding 5 Coalition ballistic pistols with 100 rounds of ammunition, and 5 sets of good, insulated clothes to replace their increasingly worn gear. Every recovered item felt like a vital, desperate win against the void. Near the shattered command console, Journey's focus shifted. Her eyes caught the glint of specialized paper beneath the wreckage. With painstaking care, she recovered a fractional set of data, 1/10 of the sector's star charts. It was invaluable navigational intelligence that suddenly made this entire desperate salvage endeavor critically worth the risk. As the team converged near the core of the ship, the sporadic discoveries ended. The atmosphere of the derelict shifted from wreckage to terror. The team found the crew, not scattered victims, but a meticulously arranged chamber of slaughter. 36 crew members were assembled in a sprawling, grotesque tableau. The bodies were not merely killed, but surgically mutilated, expertly dissected, and posed, the Predator's ultimate trophy room. The sight, even in the absolute darkness, was a crushing, final repudiation of Xander's private hope for survivors. The scene's horror was only superseded by the mission's necessity. Beyond the victims, looming silent and massive in the wreckage, was the Spelljammer helm. It was the sole functional piece of power technology left on the ship, the engine of salvation for the Starbreaker. Steve Prime initiated the comms, his voice low and tight with forced professionalism. "Command, this is Prime. We have secured high-value assets and located the helm. Casualties are heavy, 36. Repeat, 36 fatalities. Gruesome, surgical mutilation. Send the extraction team immediately, and ensure they are armed and prepared for heavy trauma exposure." Moments later, the airlock hissed. Lieutenant Grumnir and the Starbreaker engineering crew arrived, their own helmet lamps blazing into the oppressive darkness of the derelict. The sudden flood of artificial light did not bring comfort. Instead, it illuminated the scene in excruciating, horrifying detail. The carnage, the 36 mutilated crew members, was starkly revealed. The sight shattered the already strained engineering crew. Lieutenant Grumnir instantly began to shake, his tools rattling against his suit. His focus dissolved into panic and revulsion. The rest of the engineering crew, already broken by the long drift and the jump, moved like terrified ghosts, unable to process the methodical butchery surrounding the helm. They were functionally compromised before they could even begin the extraction. Commander Bazakov's voice cut through the comms, acknowledging the collapse but refusing to accept failure. "Prime, the helm is priority 1. The engineering crew is compromised. Your team is on security. Secure that perimeter. We finish this extraction, or we all die here." The order was absolute, confirming that the helm's retrieval was worth more than the crew's sanity. Steve Prime issued the final directives. Xander, Mitsuri and Journey were assigned to assist the terrified engineers, their specialized skills necessary to guide the physical extraction of the massive helm. Steve and Felix formed the outer security perimeter, their weapons trained on the void outside the hull, guarding the engineers from the killer's return, while simultaneously standing watch over the silent, bloody trophies within. The work began, surrounded by the horrific price of their continued survival.